The cleaver danced across the cutting board with a rhythmic click-clack. In seconds, a perfect slab of pork belly was reduced to uniform cubes. I chopped the ginger, garlic, and scallions into a fine mince and set them aside. With the prep work done, I reached into the water tank, hauled out a fat fish, and slammed it onto the table. I scraped away the scales, gutted it, and carved deep crosshatches into the flesh. I heated the oil until it shimmered. When the pork hit the wok, the scent of rendered fat and steam exploded, filling the entire kitchen in an instant. I scooped the crispy meat out, swapped the hot oil for fresh, and tossed in a pinch of salt. Sizzle! The fish hit the pan. I added the pork back in, threw in the seasonings, and poured 2 ladles of water over the whole thing before slamming the lid down. The soup began to bubble and thicken. My work was done for now. I leaned against the stove, staring blankly as I waited for the fish to cook. It had been 3 months. 3 whole months since I arrived in this world. Back home, I was just another corporate drone at an advertising agency. I'd had too much to drink at a club, got into a fight with a client, and ended up slapping the guy's face black and blue with the sole of my shoe. My colleagues actually took the client's side, and I was outnumbered. I ran out of the club, and then, out of nowhere, a meteor hit me. I woke up in this hellhole, inhabiting someone else's body. This was a world of cultivators. I was now Su Shan, an outer disciple of the Shinlan sect. I had a low-grade spiritual root, which wasn't great, but I guess it was better than being a commoner. Still, I hated it. I wasn't some orphan with nothing to lose. I had parents back home. I wasn't the type to start dreaming of world domination or building a harem just because I traveled to another world. I just wanted to go home. People think cultivation sounds romantic. In reality, it's just a glorified, long-lived version of the underworld. It's a gang lifestyle with better special effects. Gangster movies are fun to watch, but being a gangster in real life? That's a death sentence. I'd much rather have a promotion, a raise, and the life of a spoiled rich kid than this. My only consolation was the meteor that hit me. It wasn't a rock at all. It was a green jade seal covered in shifting runes, and it was currently lodged inside my head. While the fish simmered, I closed my eyes and focused on my consciousness, reaching out to the seal. A faint rune flickered on my forehead. Thud! A washing machine materialized on the floor out of thin air. A second later, a towel appeared and draped itself neatly over the top. I stared at the 2 objects. I discovered this ability the day I arrived. I could summon them whenever I wanted. I'd spent hours studying them, but they looked completely ordinary. No matter how much I hacked at them with a sword or tried to burn them, they wouldn't break. They weren't from this world, I was sure of it. If the seal brought me here, the secret to going home had to be hidden in these things. But if I couldn't even figure out a washing machine and a towel, I had no hope of understanding the seal itself. I crawled inside the washing machine, checking every nook and cranny for the 100th time. Nothing. I climbed out, frustrated, but a sharp pain shot through my arm. I hissed, clutching my bicep. I'd bumped an old wound from a sparring session a few days ago, a long, nasty sword cut. I pulled back my sleeve to see blood soaking through the fabric. I grabbed the towel off the machine and wrapped it around the wound. I tried everything on these objects, blood, sweat, even urine, to see if they'd react. Nothing worked. At least the towel stayed clean no matter what. The pain killed my mood for research, so I waved my hand, and the machine vanished. I walked over to the water tank and leaned over the edge. A stranger's face stared back at me, covered in a thick, messy beard. The original Su Shan was a quiet guy who never bothered with his appearance, but he had decent features under all that hair. In my 3 months of depression, I let it get even worse. I looked like a wreck. I realized I wasn't going to figure out the jade seal anytime soon. There was only one path forward. Keep cultivating, climb the ranks, and hope that higher power would bring higher understanding. The problem was my talent. A low-grade spiritual root was the bottom of the barrel. If the Shinlan sect wasn't so small, they wouldn't have even looked at me. Outer disciples have exams. If I couldn't break through to the foundation establishment stage, I'd be kicked out. Without the sect's energy, my cultivation would wither away, and I'd never get home. The original Su Shan was a hard worker. He'd spent 20 years trying to break through the chi refining stage. I'd been at it for 3 months and hadn't felt a single change. The final exam was coming up. It was the last chance for disciples stuck at the peak of chi refining. If you passed, you got a foundation establishment pill. If you still failed after that, you were gone. Damn it, I muttered. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I looked at a fat fish swimming happily in the tank and spat into the water. The fish actually swam over and ate it. The soup was done. The rich, savory aroma filled the kitchen, finally calming my nerves. Food was my only comfort now. Back in my old apartment, I used to cook for myself all the time, following recipes I found on Douyin. It was the only way to taste home. Today was a big day for the sect. The sect leader had made a breakthrough and invited guests from other sects to celebrate. In this world, breakthroughs were a chance to network and share insights. For the outer disciples, it meant a rare day off. Most were sleeping or out enjoying the scenery, but I had snuck into the kitchen to make myself something real. The usual sect food was like military slop. Even a pig would turn its nose up at it. I lifted the lid. A cloud of fragrant steam hit me. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply. I scooped a bowl of rice, ladled the oily, red fish soup over it, and took a bite. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. I was about to grab a piece of fish when the kitchen door was kicked open with a loud bang. I froze, my chopsticks halfway to my mouth. A man with a thin, slightly shifty face stood in the doorway. He was a total stranger. I frowned, ready to snap at him, but he beat me to it. He sniffed the air, his eyes widening. "Outer disciple," he shouted. "Is anyone? Holy crap, that smells amazing." I blinked, staring at the man who had just barged into my kitchen. He didn't even wait for an invitation. He walked straight to the pot, ignored the scalding steam, and reached in with his bare hands to grab a piece of fish. He popped it into his mouth and chewed slowly, nodding his head in rhythm. He muttered, his eyes closing in bliss. "This flavor is perfect. Did you make this?" "I did," I said, still holding my chopsticks. "And you are?" Before I could finish my sentence, the man grabbed my hand. His grip was like iron. "You're the one," he said urgently. "There's an emergency in the inner sect. We need a chef, and we need one now. Follow me. If you do this right, it's a massive credit to your name. I'll even get you some snacks as a reward." I didn't have time to react. He dragged me out the door with terrifying strength. Before I knew it, I was standing on the edge of a flying sword. We shot into the sky. The ground dropped away so fast my stomach stayed behind in the kitchen. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I gripped his robes for dear life. "Senior brother," I yelled over the wind. "Who are you? What's going on? Can you explain?" The man didn't even look back as he steered the sword through the clouds. "Hold on tight. Don't fall off. I'm Lu Xianjuan. I'm famous in the inner sect for my speed. The sect leader had a breakthrough, remember? We've got guests from other sects here for a celebration. We needed someone to cook a feast, but the only inner sect disciple who knows how to cook had a little accident. You're filling in. What happened to the other guy?" I shouted, my heart hammering against my ribs. "And can I really do this? These guests are powerful cultivators. Do they even need to eat?" The scenery below was a blur of green and gray. I had never even been on a roller coaster in my past life. This floating sword felt like a death trap. "They don't need to eat to survive," Lu Xianjuan replied. "But they still have appetites. As for the other guy, he got taken out by the ingredients. One of the spirit beasts fought back and mangled him. He's in no condition to work. Don't worry, though. I've already killed everything that needs cooking. Just do what you did with that fish, and you'll be fine. We're opening the feast soon, so give it everything you've got." Before I could ask anything else, the sword dived. We landed on a small hillside where a temporary kitchen had been set up. Fires were already roaring under massive woks. Just past the hill was the great hall of the sect, where the celebration was happening. I climbed off the sword, my legs shaking. I looked around and gasped. Aside from piles of exotic fruits and vegetables, there were slaughtered spirit beasts everywhere. Behind the stoves, the ground was stained red. I saw the carcass of a massive creature that looked like a wild boar, its head hacked off brutally. Its thick tusks were covered in blood. That had to be the ingredient that took out the last chef. "Most of the prep work is done," Lu Xianjuan said, eyeing me. "I see you're already at the peak of the chi condensation stage. You've got the stamina. Work fast, and you can finish this alone. If you do well, I'll make sure you get rewarded." "Yes, senior brother," I shouted. The panic started to fade, replaced by a surge of excitement. In my old life, this was what we called a career opportunity. This was my chance to shine in front of the big bosses. If I played my cards right, I could make the connections I needed to finally get into the inner sect. I took a deep breath. I pulled the towel from my arm, wiped the sweat from my brow, and draped it over my shoulder. Lu Xiangjuan let out a sudden gasp behind me. A master chef? I looked at him. He was staring at me with wide, shocked eyes. I nodded solemnly, playing along with whatever vibe he was feeling. That's right, I said firmly. Today, I am the master chef. You've got a good eye, senior brother. I turned my back to him and picked up a heavy kitchen knife. I began to process the remaining ingredients. Lu Xiangjuan stood there, looking completely dazed. Master chef? He thought to himself. Did I just say that? Why did I say that? Am I losing my mind? He shook his head, trying to clear the confusion, and looked at my right arm. His eyes locked onto my sleeve. A vivid green dragon pattern had appeared there, swirling around a bright red character that read, Special. What the hell is that? He wondered. Do outer sect uniforms have those? I've never seen that before. He rubbed his chin, trying to remember, but then his jaw dropped again. I was working. My left hand held the vegetables steady while my right hand moved the knife so fast it was just a silver blur. The sliced vegetables didn't just fall. They seemed to have lives of their own, leaping off the cutting board and lining themselves up perfectly in the prep bowls. Holy crap, Lu Xiangjuan whispered. He's like the god of cooking reborn. Where did the outer sect hide a guy like this? I didn't hear him. I had entered a state of total flow. Everything around me faded away. All my focus was on the board and the blade. For the first time since I arrived in this world, the underlying fear and confusion were gone. The uncertainty of my future didn't matter. The only thing that existed was the food. I wanted to make something perfect. I was so deep in the zone that I didn't even notice my spiritual energy was draining out of me at an insane rate. I finished the first dish, a simple stir-fry, and slid it onto the serving station. I immediately turned to start the next one. Lu Xiangjuan swallowed hard. He crept closer to the stove, his eyes fixed on the plate. It was just vegetables, but the aroma was intoxicating. Each piece was coated in a thin, shimmering glaze of oil. It smelled better than anything he had ever encountered in his life. It smells incredible, he muttered. His hand trembled as he reached toward the plate. He didn't care about the guests anymore. He just wanted one bite. But just as his fingers were about to touch the food, a thick pillar of golden light erupted from the plate. It shot straight into the sky before slowly dissolving into sparkles. It's glowing! Lu Xiangjuan screamed, jumping back. He looked at me, but I was already plating the second dish. As soon as it hit the counter, another pillar of gold light blasted into the air. Lu Xiangjuan's face twisted in pure shock. He stumbled back 2 more steps. Is there black magic in this food? A couple of disciples responsible for carrying the food to the hall arrived on their flying swords. They saw the 2 dishes and moved to pick them up, but then my third dish was finished. Boom! Another pillar of golden light. The food is glowing, the delivery disciples shouted in unison. They looked at Lu Xiangjuan, then at me. I was moving like a whirlwind, my techniques looking more like a martial arts display than cooking. Senior brother Lu, one of the disciples stammered. What is this? Who is this senior? Don't ask me, Lu Xiangjuan snapped, though he couldn't take his eyes off me. Just take the food to the hall. But, are you sure people can eat this? The disciple asked, terrified. Will it blow their mouths off? Lu Xiangjuan looked at the glowing stir-fry and licked his lips. It's just a little light. Honestly, it looks so good I'd eat it even if I knew it was poison. Now move. We're out of time. The guests in the main hall were all from powerful sects. If the food made them sick, our sect couldn't afford the consequences. Lu Xiangjuan didn't even hesitate. He decided right then that if anything went wrong, I was the one who would take the fall. He convinced himself the ingredients were fine and there was no poison. After all, he'd been watching me the whole time, and the smell was driving him crazy. The delivery disciple stepped forward to grab the first tray, but as soon as he picked it up, he froze. His nose twitched, and his eyes locked onto the dish. He couldn't move a muscle. Don't you dare try to sneak a bite, Lu Xiangjuan barked. Get going. The disciple snapped out of it and took off, flying toward the hall. Lu Xiangjuan looked at me, watching as I stayed immersed in my cooking. He realized I wasn't just some random kid. I had some serious family secrets or hidden techniques. But he didn't have time to grill me. He needed to make sure the banquet didn't turn into a disaster. Inside the grand hall, sect leader Yi Qingbi was the center of attention. She wore a flowing white dress and carried an air of cold, untouchable elegance. She laughed and chatted with the guests, finally finishing her speech about her recent cultivation breakthroughs. She told everyone that for the first time in the sect's history, she had prepared special dishes for them to enjoy. The guests didn't expect much. Most cultivators hadn't eaten real food in years. They whispered among themselves, wondering if the Xinglan sect was actually studying the culinary arts now. Then, the inner disciples began serving. As the dishes entered the hall, an incredible aroma filled the entire space. It was thick, savory, and unlike anything they had ever smelled. The cultivators began to murmur in shock. The scent alone was better than any spiritual fruit or medicinal pill they'd ever taken. They could tell just by smelling it that this food was made from rare, high-quality ingredients. Their appetites, dormant for decades, were suddenly roaring back to life. Yi Qingbi was stunned. She had only expected the cooking to be decent and the presentation to be pretty. She never imagined the disciple in the kitchen was this talented. She decided right then to reward him once the banquet was over. As the disciples finished placing a dish in front of every guest, the room went quiet. Everyone was staring at their plates, subconsciously swallowing their saliva. The urge to eat was overwhelming. Yi Qingbi felt the temptation too. She secretly swallowed hard and raised her hand. "Everyone, please. Let's eat and talk." A massive man built like a stone tower, Guiyang of the Tsangyan sect, didn't wait another second. "Thank you, sect leader Yi. I won't be polite then." He picked up his chopsticks and grabbed a piece of my stir-fried chicken. He paused for a second, confused. It looked like normal chicken, not some high-level spiritual beast. How could it smell this good? He popped it into his mouth. "Oh, ah." A loud, incredibly shameful moan erupted from his throat. The entire hall went dead silent. Guests who were about to take their first bite froze, their eyes wide, staring at him. Guiyang looked like he was in a trance. His face was flushed, and he started rubbing his own arms and chest as if he were in a dream. His disciples were mortified, looking around frantically, not knowing what to do. For 10 long seconds, he just sat there moaning and touching himself in front of everyone. "Master? Master, what's wrong with you?" His disciple whispered, his voice trembling with embarrassment. Guiyang didn't open his eyes. He just leaned back, looking completely blissed out. This is the taste of chicken, the ultimate chicken. It's a majestic, gorgeous sweetness, like a crashing wave of flavor. It's so rich, so intense. The hall remained silent. Everyone watched with dark expressions as this burly, powerful sect leader gave a sensual review of a piece of poultry. They were cringing so hard their skin was crawling. This man was a nascent soul cultivator, a leader of a major sect, and he was acting like he'd been starved for a century. His disciple buried his head in his hands. He wanted to quit the sect right then and there. "Hey, how long has your master gone without eating?" A nearby elder whispered. "At least 80 years, the disciple hissed back, his face red. "That's no excuse for this. Make him stop. I can't look at him anymore." The disciple nudged Guiyang hard. "Master, please stop. Don't eat anymore. I'm scared." Guiyang ignored him completely. "Ah, my blood. I can feel it racing. This unique, elegant taste. This is the chicken that brings true happiness." He kept rambling for another 20 seconds before he finally snapped out of it. He let out a long, satisfied breath and looked at his empty plate. "Exquisite. I haven't had an experience like that in ages. Haha, I apologize. I seem to have lost myself for a moment." The tension in the room snapped. Everyone let out a collective sigh of relief. The man was shameless. He'd just made a complete fool of himself and was now acting like nothing happened. Yi Qingbi's face was frozen. She was gripping her hands so hard her knuckles were white. She thought Guiyang was trying to humiliate her by acting like a lunatic. "I'm glad you liked it, sect leader Gua," she said through gritted teeth. "Was it really that good?" Guiyang nodded solemnly. "I have never tasted anything like it in my life. I would trade a heaven-grade pill for another bite." He wasn't lying. The moment the food hit his tongue, his mind had been flooded with visions. He felt like a parade of people were playing drums and gongs inside his head, celebrating the flavor. It was pure, unadulterated bliss. I felt like I was drowning in a literal ocean of joy. Every bit of gloom and heavy pressure in my heart just vanished, washed away by a wave of pure bliss. As a cultivator, I knew that keeping your mind clear and your spirit flowing was just as important as increasing your power level. Sometimes, a breakthrough in your state of mind mattered more than the strength of your muscles. This food was doing something even the rarest pills couldn't achieve. Yi Qingbi smiled and raised her hand again. Please, everyone, help yourselves. Back at the rear mountain of the Great Hall, I was in a complete state of panic. I sat paralyzed on the ground, my face pale and dripping with cold sweat. Right in front of me, Lu Xiangjuan was half naked. His shirt had somehow exploded into a million tiny fragments scattered across the floor. He was clutching his bowl of noodles, moaning with a look of absolute ecstasy that made my skin crawl. This flavor, it's incredible, he groaned. The chewiness of the noodles. I can't stop. I need more. My head spun. I scrambled backward on all fours, my heart hammering against my ribs. What the hell was wrong with him? Was he possessed? Why was he acting so suggestive? Was it really because of the food I cooked? I whipped my head around toward the cooking station. My eyes locked onto a single mushroom that had fallen on the floor. A mushroom? A toxic mushroom? I didn't recognize half the ingredients in this kitchen. They weren't standard grade. Had I used the wrong thing? But even if the food was bad, why did his clothes explode? Was the toxicity so strong it made his spiritual energy go haywire? I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Then, my gaze drifted toward the main hall. A loud buzzing sound filled my ears. I was dead. The sect leaders, the elders, everyone up there was eating this stuff. My brain went into overdrive. I had to get out. I already knew my chances of becoming an inner disciple were zero, but now, if they caught me, they wouldn't just kick me out, they'd kill me. I had to run. They didn't know my name or my identity yet. If I could just hide for a while, I could figure out a plan. I tried to stand up, but halfway there, my legs turned into jelly. I collapsed back onto the dirt with a heavy thud. I gasped for air, terror flaring in my eyes. Something was wrong. I had no strength left. My spiritual energy was completely drained, and my lower back felt hollow, like someone had reached in and pulled out my spine. Was it possible that just touching the toxic ingredients had poisoned me too? Beside me, Lu Xiangjuan was still making those awful noises. I gritted my teeth and let out a low growl, forcing myself up again. I didn't even make it 2 steps before I hit the ground a second time. I was drenched in sweat. I couldn't run. Even if I tried, I wouldn't get far. My eyes darted around the room, searching for anything. Finally, they locked onto the heavy meat cleaver sitting on the counter. A desperate idea began to form. Meanwhile, back in the Xinglan sect's Great Hall, Yi Qingbi was breaking out in a cold sweat. The scene before her was beyond her wildest nightmares. It was pure chaos. It looked like a dance of demons. Scraps of silk and fabric flew through the air. Tables and chairs were overturned. Some guests had their robes hanging open, others were sprawled out on the floor, and a few were even hugging each other face to face. The only thing they had in common was that they were all still clutching their plates. Only one person remained standing. It was Guiyang's top disciple, a foundation establishment cultivator. He stood in the middle of the madness, gripping his sword with both hands, trembling and completely lost. "I've never tasted anything like this," someone shouted. "The sweetness. It makes the whole dish a mystery. The filling is so juicy," another chimed in. "And the skin is so firm. It's perfect. It's the aroma of the broth," a third voice yelled. "You don't even need sauce. The way the broth soaks into the charred skin, it's exquisite." The hall was filled with the sounds of people losing their minds. They were describing the yellow skin and the black flecks of the garnish like they were talking about a religious experience. It was as if thousands of tiny particles were dancing on their tongues. The moans and cries of delight were deafening. Almost everyone had eaten my cooking at the exact same time. When Guiyang had his outburst earlier, people just thought he was being eccentric. No one suspected foul play. Why would the tiny Xinglan sect try to poison powerful guests? It would be suicide. So, once they saw Guiyang enjoy it, their hunger took over. Guiyang's disciple was shaking so hard, he could barely hold his weapon. He pointed his sword at the crowd, then at Yi Qingbi, his mind racing. He had wanted to eat too, but his master had snatched the plate away from him. He had been spared, but now he was the only sane person left in a room full of lunatics. It felt like he had wandered into a nest of high-level demonic cultivators. A single drop of sweat rolled down Yi Qingbi's cheek. Even as a nascent soul cultivator, she was shaken to her core. This banquet was supposed to celebrate her breakthrough and build alliances. How did it turn into this? And all because of a few dishes? The person who cooked this was just an ordinary disciple. The ingredients weren't even top tier. Yet, everyone from foundation establishment to nascent soul had been hit by the same effect at the same time. None of them could resist it. But before she could process it further, something even more terrifying happened. The guests started waking up. They didn't wake up all at once. It happened in waves. When the first guest snapped out of it and saw the people around him acting like Guiyang had, he looked like he'd been struck by lightning. He saw a female cultivator he knew with her robes disheveled, and the realization hit him like a physical blow. If they looked like that, then he must have looked the same way. Guiyang was the first of the heavyweights to recover. His rage was instantaneous. He was known as the Iron Man of the cultivation world, a hardened warrior. The thought that he had been preening and moaning like a fool in front of everyone was unbearable. His mind played back the images of the others, and he immediately mapped his own face onto those shameful actions. He wanted to die of embarrassment, and that embarrassment turned into a roar of fury. Boom! A 10-foot-tall fire giant erupted from his body, turning the hall a hellish shade of red. He stormed toward Yi Qingbi, waves of heat blasting in every direction. Behind him, other cultivators began to wake up, drawing their weapons and channeling their killing intent directly at her. The fire giant raised a massive flaming sword. Sect leader Yi, Guiyang growled, his voice trembling with rage. I think you owe us all an explanation. Every foreign cultivator in the room leveled their weapons at her. Those with torn clothes quickly summoned new robes with a flick of their sleeves, their eyes burning with anger. They felt toyed with, humiliated by a woman from a minor sect. The tension was suffocating. The Xinglan sect elders tried to step forward to mediate, but Yi Qingbi raised a hand to stop them. She was terrified deep down, but her face remained a mask of calm. The two sides stared each other down for a few agonizing seconds. Then, Yi Qingbi's right hand moved. She reached out, picked up her chopsticks, and slowly lifted a piece of the food. Under the watchful, murderous eyes of the crowd, she placed it in her own mouth. The killing intent in the room flickered. The fire giant's flames dimmed slightly. She ate it. She actually ate it herself. The guests were stunned. What was her goal? Did she really think she could just eat her way out of this mess? I kept my expression calm, but inside, I was pushing my spiritual energy to the absolute limit. I had to brace myself for whatever freakish reaction was about to hit me. If I didn't do this, the Xinglan sect was finished. The moment the food touched my tongue, a violent impulse surged from deep within my heart. My eyes snapped wide open. This feeling, it was overwhelming. For a split second, I tasted coral and sea crab, but then a wave of pure, ecstatic joy crashed over my consciousness. It shattered my thoughts completely. It felt like a hidden thread inside me had suddenly snapped. Beneath my outer robes, I felt my undergarments quietly slip down. A soft, involuntary moan escaped my lips. I slapped my hand over my mouth instantly, but it was too late. I couldn't hold it back. A string of shameful, high-pitched praise poured out of me. It's incredible. This shumai is absolutely incredible. I couldn't stop myself. The shrimp had been ground into a paste, but kept its perfect snap. The fresh vegetables were crisp and refreshing. The egg yolk was soft, mellow, and sweet. And that Jinhua ham, it was savory, rich, and smooth without being greasy at all. The entire hall went silent. The guests stared at each other, the murderous tension draining away as they watched me have a total meltdown over a piece of food. If the sect leader herself was reacting like this, then clearly, this wasn't some targeted insult. What is sect leader Yi doing? Someone whispered. Do you understand this? Not at all. And what's a Jinhua ham? Is it from some rare spirit beast? By the time my embarrassing outburst finally ended, my forehead was covered in a fine layer of sweat. I leaned against the table, panting slightly, feeling like I had just run a marathon. The swords and spears that had been pointed at me were finally lowered. Guiyang, now back in his human form, stepped forward. "Sect leader Yi," he said, his voice heavy. "I think it's time you spoke." I nodded twice, forcing a smile onto my face despite how shaky I felt. I let 4 words slowly drift from my lips. Heavenly luck, divine talent. The words hit the room like a crack of thunder. The cultivators from the various sects stood frozen, their faces twisting into expressions of pure shock. Guiyang's stern expression wavered. "Are you saying," Guiyang asked, "that there is a cultivator with a heavenly luck divine talent in your sect? And he made this food?" I nodded solemnly. It was the only lie that could possibly explain this madness. I didn't even fully understand what was happening myself, but I had to bluff my way through this first and investigate later. The guests looked stunned. In this world, the heavenly Tao governs all things, but occasionally, the heavens pick a favorite. They grant someone a power that defies logic, a divine talent. It's beyond mere magic. It's a fundamental gift. Usually, someone with this kind of luck is a top-tier genius. If a minor sect like mine had one, they'd usually hide him or he'd be snatched up by a superpower. But a divine talent for cooking? It was unheard of. "Please, everyone, take your seats," I said, gesturing to the tables. "I will explain everything." They didn't need to be told twice. They straightened their clothes, fixed their chairs, and sat down immediately. "It is true," I continued, my voice steady. "We have a disciple with a heavenly luck divine talent. However, his gift is a bit unique. It isn't meant for combat. Instead, it nourishes the mind and spirit. He hasn't quite mastered the intensity of his power yet, which is why you all lost your composure. It was an oversight in our hospitality." The realization dawned on them. If the talent was only for cooking, it was technically trash in a world where strength is everything. But even a support-type talent was still a sign of incredible natural potential. "I had him prepare this feast to thank you all for coming," I said. "And because our sect is entering the Crystal Jade Centenary Tournament for the first time, we hope to gain some guidance from our fellow cultivators so we might progress further. That was our only intention." The guests were still reeling from the news. One of them finally spoke up. "Sect leader Yi, you're being too polite. Sharing experience for the tournament is a small matter. But, could we meet this disciple?" I shook my head. "I'm afraid I can't agree to that. He is our core disciple. I'm sure you all understand why." Disappointment washed over the room. A heavenly luck user was a legend you only heard about in stories. To be so close to one and not see him was frustrating, but they couldn't push me. An elder from the Aegean Gate stood up. "It's fine. Just knowing such a talent exists is a harvest in itself. Since you asked about the tournament, I'll share some news. This year's competition is going to be very different from the past." Meanwhile, back in the kitchen area, Lu Xiangjuan was slowly coming to his senses. He was holding a bowl that had been licked spotlessly clean. The intoxicating taste was still echoing in his mouth. "Senior brother, wake up." The panicked voice jolted him. Lu Xiangjuan blinked, staring at the strange man standing in front of him. Who was this pretty boy, and why was he wearing an outer disciple's uniform? Suddenly, Lu Xiangjuan felt a chill. He looked down. "What the hell? Where are my clothes?" he roared. He lunged forward and shoved the young man, Su Shan, sending him flying 5 or 6 meters. Su Shan hit the ground with a groan, his face pale. He was already exhausted from the cooking process, and that shove nearly finished him off. Lu Xiangjuan stood there bare-chested, immediately pulling a sword from his storage bag. He pointed the tip at Su Shan, his mind racing. He remembered eating a bowl of noodles. He remembered a feeling of intense, explosive happiness, like a man breaking a 100-day fast. But why was his shirt shredded on the floor? It didn't feel like poison or a spell. He felt amazing. "Who are you?" Lu Xiangjuan demanded, his voice low and threatening. "And why is my shirt in pieces?" "I'm Su Shan," the boy stammered, trembling. "You were already like this when I found you, senior brother. You're an outer disciple. Why are you even up here in the inner sect?" "Senior sister Li Qing, she left something behind at the outer gate," Su Shan lied, sweat pouring down his face. "Elder Chow told me to bring it back. I got curious, decided to look around, and got lost. Then I found you." Lu Xiangjuan squinted. He knew his senior sister Li but he wasn't sure if her name was Li Qing. He looked at the boy's clean-shaven face and panicked eyes, trying to decide if he was telling the truth. I hoped my new face would be enough to fool him. I looked completely different now, and if I played my cards right, I could get out of this alive. To hide my nerves, I clutched my shoulder and let out a sharp hiss of pain. It worked. Lu Xiangjuan's suspicion softened. He lowered his sword and stepped forward to help me up. He apologized, saying he hadn't realized I was just an outer disciple doing a favor for Elder Chao. He told me not to worry about being in the inner sect. I gave him a weak, forced smile and thanked him. Then he frowned. He asked if I had seen a man with a massive beard. He wanted to know the guy's name. A beard? I asked, my voice steady. You must mean Tian Xian. He has a huge one. I didn't blink. I didn't sweat. In the outer sect, most men were too lazy to shave or just wanted to look tough. You couldn't throw a rock without hitting a guy with a beard. But Lu Xiangjuan wasn't looking for just any beard. He grabbed my arm, pointing to his own bicep. He told me the man had a blue dragon embroidered right there on his sleeve. A dragon? I looked at my arm, acting confused. Nobody has a dragon on their sleeve, senior brother. Lu Xiangjuan let out a heavy breath and released me. He looked frustrated. He decided he would just find the man himself. But then he stopped and looked at me intensely. He asked what happened when I first found him. I hesitated, acting shy. I told him I saw him shirtless on the floor, eating noodles like he was possessed, shouting reviews of the food. Lu Xiangjuan's face went pale. He looked like he'd been hit by a bolt of lightning. He turned his head toward the main banquet hall. He realized the food was the problem, and there were dozens of important guests eating it right now. We have to go, he hissed, cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. Come with me to the outer sect. He grabbed me and pulled me onto his flying sword. We took off into the wind. He was terrified. If something went wrong at the banquet, he didn't want to take the fall alone. He needed to find the bearded man who actually cooked the meal. We landed in the outer sect a few minutes later. He barked at me, asking where Tian Xian lived. I told him I didn't know. He roared in frustration, told me to get lost, and vanished into the darkness to search on his own. I waited until he was gone, then adjusted my robes. I walked in the opposite direction, heading toward a small river that I used as my secret hideout. It was the only place I could be alone. I collapsed onto the grass, gasping for air. I was exhausted. I thought I had found a lucky break, but I had stumbled into a nightmare. I couldn't leave the sect. I had no survival skills in the outside world, but staying felt like waiting for an execution. I crawled to the water's edge to wash my face. I looked at my reflection and froze. The man staring back at me was incredibly handsome. He was sharp, refined, and looked like a legendary hero from a storybook. The messy, wild beard was gone, revealing a face that could make a living just by standing still. No wonder Lu Xiangjuan didn't recognize me. I barely recognized myself. I lay back down, staring at the sky. Being handsome wouldn't save me. I needed to figure out what went wrong in that kitchen. My energy had been completely drained while I was cooking. It wasn't poison, but it was something extreme. Then I remembered Lu Xiangjuan pointing at the dragon on the sleeve. I looked at my right arm. There was a faint red mark near a cut I'd received earlier. I pulled a strange, old towel out of my storage space, an item I'd found months ago that I thought was useless. I wrapped the towel around my arm, then whipped it off. My heart nearly stopped. A glowing blue dragon appeared on my skin, shimmering with a red border. It looked exactly like the mark of a super chef from the old cartoons I used to watch. I whispered the words to myself. Super chef. When I was cooking, I had shouted those words, thinking it was just a joke. But the towel was real. The explosive happiness Lu Xiangjuan felt, the way he acted like a character in a cooking anime. It was all because of this item. The food wasn't poisoned. It was just supernaturally delicious. But then a terrifying thought hit me. If the powerful cultivators in the banquet hall were having the same intense reactions as Lu Xiangjuan, they wouldn't think it was a gift. They would think they were being attacked. I was in even more trouble than I thought. I figured things would be okay. If there were any serious side effects, I would have felt them by now. I clutched my chest, waiting for my heart to stop racing, and slowly let out a breath. I was starting to calm down. I looked at my sleeve again. The blue dragon mark of the super chef was already starting to fade away. It seemed the power was temporary. Still, This was the breakthrough I'd been looking for. I had spent months studying the strange items I'd found, and finally, I knew what this towel actually did. It was a game changer, but I needed to know more. I couldn't test it here in the Azure Cloud sect. It was too dangerous. I needed to get outside, find a quiet place, and see exactly how far this supernatural cooking could go. But first, I had to deal with the mess I'd made. I needed to get back to the outer disciple dorms and see if the coast was clear. I sat down cross-legged and closed my eyes. I needed to recover my strength. I began circulating my energy, using the basic cultivation technique every outer disciple knew by heart. It was simple stuff, just the fundamentals. But as soon as the spiritual energy entered my body, I snapped my eyes open. Something was wrong. Seriously wrong. The speed at which I converted energy was agonizingly slow. I already had a low-grade spiritual root, which made cultivation a struggle at the best of times. But now, it felt like my talent had dropped even lower. If a high-grade root was a rushing river and a low-grade root was a slow leak, I was currently a clogged pipe. It was like trying to breathe through a straw while having a massive headache. Was this the price for using the towel? My head throbbed. I was stuck between being thrilled about my new power and terrified of what it was doing to my body. I didn't have time to dwell on it. Night was falling. I wrapped a piece of cloth around my jaw to hide the fact that I'd shaved my beard and trudged back to the dorms. The room was small, cramped, and smelled like unwashed socks. 3 of my roommates were already there. As soon as I pushed the door open, they all stared at me like I was a ghost. "Who the hell are you?" one of them asked. "Are you serious?" I sat down on my bunk and kept my voice flat. "We've lived together for how long, and you don't recognize me? It's Su-Shan." "Holy crap." One of them jumped up, leaning in close. "Shanji, you actually look like this? You're a total pretty boy. Man, you've been hiding a face like that under a beard this whole time." Another added, laughing. Then he paused, looking suspicious. "Wait, where's the beard? Why'd you shave? And what happened to your chin?" I pulled back the cloth, wincing as I showed them the bloody gash on my jaw. I'd smashed it with a rock by the river to make it look like a training accident. I messed up while practicing. Had to shave the beard to clean the wound. They didn't look entirely convinced. "You know Elder Chow and an intersect senior were running around today looking for someone, right? They were looking for a guy with a big beard. It wasn't you, was it?" My heart skipped. "You mean Senior Brother Lu?" I asked, acting casual. "I saw him earlier. He was definitely looking for someone, but it wasn't me. Why do you think I was acting so sneaky when I walked in? I thought I was in trouble for being out late." That seemed to satisfy them. They lost interest pretty quickly. "You missed the drama," one said, flopping back onto his bed. "That intersect guy was on a rampage. He was checking everyone's arms, looking for some chef with a dragon tattoo. He even asked who was missing. You were the only one not there." I looked at the 3 of them. "And you didn't tell them it was me, did you?" "No way, Shanji," my bunkmate said, waving a hand dismissively. "We're brothers. Besides, as soon as he mentioned a chef and a dragon, we knew it couldn't be you. You can't cook to save your life. And that Senior Lu looked like he wanted to kill someone. Nobody wanted to get involved in that mess." I nodded and lay back, staring at the ceiling. Just as I thought. Outer disciples are terrified of trouble. They'd rather keep their heads down than play hero. I was safe for now, but I still had to worry about Elder Chow. I'd have to lie low for a few days, feel out the situation, and then find an excuse to leave the mountain. The room went quiet for a second before someone spoke up again. "Shanji, you've been training so hard lately, even getting hurt. You're really planning on taking the outer sect exam, aren't you?" "What else am I supposed to do?" I muttered. "If I don't pass, I get kicked off the mountain. I haven't broken through to the next level yet. This exam is my last shot." One of the guys sighed. "Look, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but we all have low-grade roots. Elder Chow has said it 1,000 times. People like us just don't make it. Even if we get into the inner sect, we'll be at the bottom forever. The exam is dangerous. Why not just go back down the mountain and live like a king in the mortal world?" "He's right," another added. "You've been here longer than any of us. If I were you, I'd have quit years ago. Just go home. Go home." I looked at the ceiling, my mind heavy. If I had a family to go back to, maybe I'd consider it. But I knew the truth. There was no path back. I had to move forward. If I couldn't make it as a cultivator, I might as well be dead. The guys started joking about how many wives they'd have once they gave up and moved back to their villages. It was annoying. Give it a rest, I snapped, pulling the blanket over my head. You talk about going back like it's a dream. But once you leave, you'll regret it for the rest of your lives. Think about the senior sisters in the inner sect. They're immortals. They don't even need to bathe, and they still smell like flowers. You go back to the mortal world, and the prettiest woman you find will smell like sweat after 2 days. You won't even get close enough to smell a fairy's socks down there. Now shut up and sleep. The room went dead silent. Nobody said another word. Meanwhile, in the main hall of the Azure Cloud sect, the atmosphere was anything but quiet. It was tense. Yi Qingyu sat on his throne, his face unreadable. The other elders were lined up beside him. Lu Xiangjuan stood in front of them, drenched in sweat, finishing his report. So, Yi Qingyu said, his voice echoing. The person who cooked that dish wasn't the disciple we chose. It was just some random guy you grabbed from the outer sect. Yes, Lu Xiangjuan whispered. If you knew something was wrong, why didn't you detain him? Have you found him yet? Elder Chao stepped forward before Lu could answer. Sect leader, Lu Xiangjuan came to me immediately to search the outer sect. But the man is gone. Honestly, I've been in charge of the outer disciples for years, and I've never heard of anyone fitting that description. Is it possible he was an intruder? Someone sent to cause chaos? I doubt it, another elder chimed in. What would be the point? He didn't poison anyone. He just made food. The elders began to argue, but then one of them looked at Yi Qingyu. Sect leader, I tasted that food too. It wasn't poison, and it wasn't a spell. It was something else entirely. It affected the mind in a way I've never seen. You mentioned heavenly luck, divine talent. Is that really possible? We've all heard the legends, but no one has ever actually seen it. Yi Qingyu slowly nodded, his eyes fixed on the distance. The power of a heavenly luck divine talent is impossible to predict. It manifests in strange ways. Some are born with it, while others awaken it later in life. My voice carried weight as I looked at the elders. I told them that the disciple in our sect might have awakened his talent by accident and hidden himself out of fear. We had to keep searching. Every single person, inner and outer sect, needed to be checked. I ordered them to test everyone's spiritual aptitude. A talent like that can't be hidden forever once you start looking. But I warned them to be quiet about it. Many sects at the banquet heard my claim, and they were likely already poking around in the shadows. We had to be low-key. I looked at Elder Jean, the man responsible for the disciple who brought the food. I told him this was his responsibility now. Elder Jean wiped sweat from his palms and dismissed Lu Xiangjuan. He looked at me, worried. He asked what we should do if the cook wasn't one of ours, but an outsider instead. I didn't have an answer for that. If we had no clues, we'd just have to take it one step at a time. As long as this mystery person wasn't showing hostility, we'd stick to the plan. I shifted the focus. I had invited everyone here under the guise of my breakthrough, but the real priority was the Crystal Jade Centenary Tournament. The rules were different this year. It was a big deal, something that would decide the future of our sect. I told the elders to prepare a list of their best disciples. As for me, my breakthrough was rushed. I needed to go into seclusion to stabilize my cultivation before the tournament began. I left the rest in their hands. 2 days passed. The sect was quiet. I was back in my own shoes, Su Shan, the outer disciple. I had just finished my daily chores and found a secluded spot to meditate. Usually, outer disciples aren't this free, but I was a veteran. I knew how to navigate the system. The elders in charge of us were pretty hands-off, especially with someone like me who was nearing the age limit for being kicked out. I slowly stopped my cultivation. A dark cloud of worry hung over me. Even though my stunt in the inner sect hadn't caused a massive explosion yet, I was facing a personal problem. My ability to convert spiritual chi into power had dropped significantly. Normally, I'd recover from exhaustion in half a day. Now, it had taken 2 full days just to get my energy back. My body was broken. It had to be a side effect of that magical towel. I sighed and brushed the dirt off my pants. I headed toward the outer sect elder's residence. I was walking through a fog of confusion, but sitting around wouldn't fix it. Now that I was back at full strength, I needed an excuse to leave the mountain and test the towel's powers properly. After a long walk, I arrived at a lavish courtyard, a rare sight in the outer sect. This was where Elder Chao lived. Thinking about our encounter 2 days ago made me hesitate. But before I could turn away, a voice drifted out from the house. It was Elder Chow. He told me to stop loitering and just come in. I steadied my breath and walked to the door. The door opened on its own. Elder Chow was sitting there with his legs crossed, casually reading a book. Without even looking up, he tapped a stone disc on the table. It was the same array used to test talent when we first joined the sect. He told me to put my hand on it. I did. As soon as my palm touched the cold jade, he told me to take it off. He didn't even check the reading. He said he knew it couldn't be me. I was confused. He explained that the sect was retesting everyone's aptitude. If I had a heavenly luck talent, the disc would have reacted before I even touched it. He finally looked up from his book and froze. He stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. He asked who I was. I told him I was Su Shan. I had just shaved my beard because of a jaw injury. He couldn't believe it. He muttered that I was handsome enough for the heavens to feed me, then quickly cleared his throat to regain his composure. He asked what I wanted. I told him I finished my chores early and wanted to know if there were any missions that would take me down the mountain. Usually, outer disciples handle the grunt work, protecting mortals from weak beasts or buying supplies for the sect. Elder Chow smirked. He asked if I was just eager to see the world before my time at the sect ran out. I told him I just wanted to stay busy. I also mentioned that I planned to take the final outer sect exam. Elder Chow's expression softened. He told me I was a hard-working, honest kid, but my talent just wasn't there. He warned me that the exam was dangerous. People got hurt, and if I walked away with a permanent injury, my life as a mortal would be miserable. Only 2 people from my year had passed, and they both had decent spiritual roots. He wasn't trying to look down on me. He was a former rogue cultivator himself. He knew that sometimes, you just have to accept your fate. I thanked him for the concern, but I told him my mind was made up. He smiled and didn't push further. He liked my spirit. He told me that in a month, right before the exam, he'd take me to the inner sect library to pick out a basic spell to practice. I was shocked. I'd never heard of outer disciples getting access to spells. He told me to keep it quiet. It was an old rule for those at the peak of the chi condensation stage. Most outer disciples only knew basic physical moves and couldn't use spiritual energy in combat, which is why they usually failed the exam. If someone could master a spell and prove their combat talent, the sect might still find them useful despite poor aptitude. He waved off my gratitude and got down to business. Since I wanted to leave the mountain, he actually had a job for me. Something was wrong with the spirit array at the base of the mountain. A ghost fire spirit had appeared. Elder Chow told me the spirit had already killed several people. He wanted me to go and eliminate it. I stood there, frozen for a second, before I managed to find my voice. I asked him what exactly a ghost fire spirit was. He gave me a side eye like I was an idiot. He told me it was just what commoners called a ghost. My heart skipped a beat. A ghost? He told me not to make a scene. Apparently, they were rare but not actually powerful. He explained that if I just circulated my spiritual energy to my eyes, I'd be able to see it clearly. These spirits were just echoes of living things that had died. They only appeared under very specific conditions. They weren't smart, they just acted on basic instincts. Usually, they just did annoying things like rattling windows, blowing out candles, or sitting on people's chests while they slept. Most of them didn't last long and would just dissipate on their own after a few days. I was confused. I asked him about all those legends of evil spirits murdering people. Were they all fake? He admitted that spirits had different levels of strength. Some were smarter and knew how to cause real harm. He warned me that the one I was facing might actually have some skill. But in the end, it was still just a spirit. Once I found it, I just had to channel my energy and crush it. He made it sound like it was no harder than swatting a fly. I nodded, feeling a bit better. But then I realized something. I asked him how I was supposed to prove I'd finished the job. Elder Chow rolled his eyes at me. He told me there was no proof needed and certainly no reward. For all he knew, the spirit might be gone by the time I got there. He told me to just go do it and not to bother reporting back. He reminded me to just show up a month before the big exam to find him. I thanked him and set off. It took me half a day of running to reach the outskirts of Litai City. Since I was just an outer disciple, I hadn't learned any movement spells or sword flying. I had to rely on my own 2 legs. I could have gotten a horse, but honestly, they weren't as fast as I was. Even though a chi condensation cultivator is at the bottom of the food chain in a sect, we are leagues beyond normal humans. When I saw the massive sign on the city walls, I felt a strange sense of peace. It's all about perspective. In the sect, I was a nobody. But here, in the mortal world, I felt like a powerhouse. I caught my breath and walked into the city. It was late afternoon, and the heat was fading. The streets were packed with people and vendors shouting their prices. The original owner of this body had been in the Azure Cloud sect for 20 years and rarely ever came down the mountain. But I knew other disciples weren't so boring. They'd take any chance to come down here to eat, drink, and gamble. After all, once you start cultivating, you realize it's just as repetitive as a 9 to 5 job. I wandered the streets with curiosity, watching the world go by until the sun started to set. I asked around and eventually found myself standing in front of the most luxurious building in the city, the Begonia Pavilion. The smell of thick, cheap rouge hit me immediately. On the second-floor balcony, several women were waving and winking at me. I looked up and immediately lost my appetite. This was the most famous brothel in town, and it was a letdown. Up close, their makeup was caked on, their pores were huge, and I could literally see one of them had a booger. My enhanced senses were turning out to be a curse. Still, I had to go in. Elder Chow might have acted like this mission didn't matter, but he was a powerful man. If I blew off his request, I'd be an idiot. Plus, a brothel this big had to have a kitchen I could borrow. I walked inside. A servant immediately scurried over. He saw my simple clothes, but noticed my posture was different from a commoner. He asked if it was my first time and if I had a specific girl in mind. I told him to just get me a private room and follow me up. I didn't want anyone else. Once we were in the room, I threw open the window to try and vent out the suffocating smell of perfume. The servant stood by the door, looking nervous. I told him to sit down because I had questions. He looked surprised but complied. I asked him if he knew about the hauntings in the city, the ones where people had died. He nodded instantly. He told me it happened recently. A group of scholars had gone to the south of the city for a spring outing and were found dead later. They looked like they had been scared to death. Rumor was it happened at Shiyin Temple, a place that had been abandoned for decades. An abandoned temple? That felt a bit too cliché. I asked him if there was anywhere else. He shook his head. He said it was just that one spot in the wilderness. He mentioned that even the Begonia Pavilion's customers used to take the girls out there for excitement in the ruins, but now, nobody dared to go near it. Then he remembered something else. 2 months ago, someone had hanged themselves at that temple. A servant who couldn't take their master's abuse anymore. It made sense. A suicide in a place like that was the perfect recipe for a spirit. I decided I'd head to Chiyin Temple to try my luck. But before I left, I wanted to use their kitchen. I asked him how many kitchens they had. He looked confused but told me they had 2, one for guests and one for the staff. I asked if the staff kitchen was empty. He said it was, but he didn't understand what I wanted. I stood up and told him to lead the way. He hesitated, saying outsiders weren't allowed in the back and that it was dirty. I didn't say a word. I just pulled out a silver ingot and held it in front of his face. The sect gave us a small allowance for emergencies, and this was basically my entire life savings. The servant's eyes locked onto the silver. His voice softened, but he still looked worried. He told me he really shouldn't let me in. It was against the rules. He was worried I might be there to poison the food. When I saw the money wasn't working, I didn't argue. I took the silver ingot back into my hand and slowly began to squeeze. The servant watched, his jaw dropping, as the solid metal began to deform under my grip. The silver ingot was like clay in my hands. As I squeezed with all my strength, the metal actually oozed through the gaps in my fingers. The servant's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He hit the floor so hard his knees made a loud thud. Immortal Master. I was blind. I didn't recognize your greatness. Please, forgive me. Get up, I said, looking down at him. Can you take me there now? He scrambled to his feet and pulled the door open, a fawning smile plastered on his face. Yes. Right this way, please. I nodded, satisfied. I pinched off a small bead of silver from the crushed ingot and pressed it into his palm before stepping outside. We reached the back courtyard of the Begonia Pavilion. The staff kitchen was a dim, cramped space. The servant lit a candle, and the flickering light cast long, mysterious shadows across my face. He kept stealing glances at me, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. He probably thought I was some weirdo looking for a job earlier. Now, he was looking at a real cultivator. He'd only seen people like me flying high in the sky before. Up close, I probably wasn't what he expected. I was a bit stingy for one thing. Immortal Master, he whispered cautiously. What exactly are you planning to do? Is anyone else coming here? I asked. No one. He looked nervous. Good. Get the fire started. I walked over to the counter to inspect the ingredients. Being a brothel kitchen, they had a decent variety, even if most of it was just scraps or ugly leftovers from the guests' meals. It was enough for what I needed. The servant crouched down to stoke the fire. I laid out my tools and signaled for him to stand back. I took a deep breath and pulled a white towel out of thin air. The servant's eyes lit up at the trick. Then, I wrapped the towel around my right arm and ripped it away in one swift motion. The blue dragon emblem flashed on my sleeve. Superior Chef, the servant screamed. He recoiled half a step, his hands frantically clutching his face. His eyes were wide with confusion. Superior Chef? Why did I say that? Why couldn't I stop myself? I swallowed hard. It was just as I suspected. Every time I revealed that emblem, the person watching was forced to shout that specific phrase. Let's try that again, I muttered. I covered the emblem with the towel and snapped it away again. The servant, still looking dazed, suddenly lunged forward with an even louder roar. Superior Chef. SUSU Superior. I kept snapping the towel. He kept screaming. It was a perfect, unstoppable crowd control skill. Every single time he saw it, he had to yell. Finally, I threw the towel over my shoulder. The servant collapsed to the floor, drenched in sweat. He crawled toward the corner of the kitchen, trembling. Immortal Master, did you cast a spell on me? Don't be afraid, I said. I just enjoy fine dining. I recently developed a new dish, and I need someone to test it. You're the lucky one. Stay there, and don't move until you've eaten. Without waiting for his reaction, I grabbed a kitchen knife. The stained iron blade became a blur in my hand. Vegetables seemed to come alive on the cutting board, flying through the air and landing in neat, organized piles. The servant watched, mesmerized by the spectacle. I heated the wok, added the oil, and tossed in the spices. The ingredients jumped into the pan in perfect order. That familiar sense of joy and satisfaction flooded my heart again, but this time, I stayed focused. I watched my body's reaction. My spiritual energy was draining rapidly with every stir of the ladle. By the time the stir-fried rock rat was finished, I dropped the ladle, my forehead covered in a thin layer of sweat. My heart was racing. I had burned through nearly half of my spiritual energy on a single dish. Back at the sect, I had made dozens of meals in a row. How had I survived that? The drain from this chef system was absolutely brutal. The servant was sniffing the air like a madman, his eyes locked onto the plate. He couldn't believe his luck, a meal prepared by an immortal master, all for him. Before I could think further, a massive pillar of golden light erupted from the plate. It shot straight up, hitting the ceiling and illuminating the entire room. It's glowing, the servant shrieked. I stared at the light, my face bathed in a golden hue. After a few seconds, the glow faded, leaving behind a steaming plate of food. I fought the urge to take a bite myself and wave the servant over. He scrambled forward and grabbed a pair of chopsticks, but he froze just as he touched the food. He looked at me with pleading eyes. Eat up, I said. It's all yours. He took a bite. His eyes rolled back. Oh, that taste, it's like it's grabbing my tongue. The sourness is hitting my stomach like a lightning bolt. He started making these strange, rhythmic moans, his eyes closed in ecstasy. My eye twitched. It was exactly like Lu Xianjuan's reaction. This system was disgusting. One part of the tool made people scream catchphrases, and the other made them lose their minds over food. I summoned the towel again and started testing. I toggled the servant back and forth between screaming, "Superior Chef," and moaning about the salty, sweet harmony of the eggs. I finally understood the towel's power. This was a life-saving treasure. Forget the cooking. If I could make an enemy freeze and scream a catchphrase in the middle of a fight, I could kill anyone. And revealing the towel didn't even cost spiritual energy. By the time I finished my analysis, the servant had licked the plate clean. He was slowly coming back to his senses, though he was still running his tongue over his teeth, trying to catch every last bit of flavor. How do you feel? I asked, grabbing him by the collar. I feel so good, he groaned, his eyes still dreamy. So good. I can see that. Anything else? Any discomfort? It was too good. It felt like someone tied me up, and I couldn't take it anymore. I slapped him twice hard. The sting brought him back to reality. He started to kneel to apologize, but I cut him off. That dish was my own creation, I said coldly. Eating it adds 10 years to your life. But I've placed a curse on it. If you ever tell a soul that you ate my cooking, you'll drop dead on the spot. Understood. I understand. I won't say a word. I'd rather die, he promised fervently. He was beaming. A life-changing meal and 10 extra years of life. He thought he'd hit the jackpot. Get out, I ordered. Prepare a room for me. I'm staying the night. And put a guard on the door. No one enters without my permission. Yes, master. He bowed and hurried out. 10 minutes later, a brilliant golden light flashed through the cracks of the kitchen door once again. Inside, a soft, dreamlike moan echoed in the dark. Ah, the noodles are melting in my mouth, such a delicate, elegant texture, and this red-white powder. It's sugar. I had managed to turn simple noodles into a gourmet pastry, and the aroma was incredibly elegant. Even I was impressed with my own work. The next morning, I woke up feeling refreshed. I sat up in a bed that smelled faintly of rouge and powder, my eyes bright and full of energy. Eating my own cooking the night before had worked wonders. It hadn't restored my spiritual energy or physical strength, but the sheer mental satisfaction was overwhelming. It washed away all the stress I'd been carrying. Waking up today, I felt like anything was possible. I sat there for a moment, savoring the memory of the meal. I'd made 2 dishes, and interestingly, my spiritual energy hadn't stalled afterward. It seemed my cultivation issues were definitely linked to pushing my cooking skills beyond their limits. I couldn't worry about that now, though. I had to focus on the outer sect examination. That was my top priority. I got dressed and headed downstairs. During the day, the brothel was dim and quiet. A single figure stood by the door, waiting for me. It was the servant from last night. As soon as he saw me, he rushed over with a flattering, desperate smile. "Immortal Master, are you leaving?" he asked. "Yeah. Is there a problem?" He looked troubled, hesitating for a moment before dropping to his knees. "Can you stop kneeling every time you see me? It's annoying," I snapped. "Master," he groaned, his voice thick with despair. "I ate your cooking last night, and now I can't eat anything else. Everything else tastes like trash. It's disgusting. What am I supposed to do if I can never taste your food again?" He started to sob uncontrollably. "I feel like ants are crawling all over me. I'm breaking out in cold sweats. Please, get lost. You're just addicted to the flavor," I said, kicking him over. "Stop being dramatic. You'll be fine after you go hungry for a couple of days." I pushed the door open and walked out. Behind me, the servant sat on the threshold, tears streaming down his face as he watched me leave. I headed straight for the southern outskirts of the city. I asked a few locals for directions, and after an hour of walking, I finally found the path toward Chiyin Temple. The trail was narrow but manageable, leading toward a dense, overgrown forest. Suddenly, I stopped. I rubbed the space between my eyebrows. Something felt wrong. There was a faint, pulsing heat right in the center of my forehead. It wasn't an illusion. I was at the peak of the chi refining stage. I knew my body well enough to know when something was interfering with my senses. This was where the Azure Seal was located. To me, nothing was more important than the mysterious object that had brought me to this world. I sank my consciousness into my sea of souls and felt a jolt of excitement mixed with worry. The Azure Seal was flickering with a soft light. A new rune was being lit up from the bottom. This had never happened before. The washing machine and the towel each had their own runes. If this third one lit up, it meant I was about to unlock a third item. My heart hammered against my ribs. I started walking into the woods, moving cautiously. The further I went, the hotter my forehead became. I stopped and took 2 steps back. The heat faded. It was acting like a detector. I followed the signal, moving deeper into the trees. After about 30 steps, the temperature dropped again. I frowned and changed direction. The heat spiked. I looked at the thick forest ahead, feeling a surge of caution. The Azure Seal wasn't warning me of danger. It was guiding me through a maze. Going in could be risky, and I wasn't sure I could handle what was inside. But if it involved the seal, I couldn't walk away. The items I'd gotten so far were incredible. The towel had already proven its worth, and while I hadn't figured out the washing machine yet, I knew it had to be special. A third item would give me an even better chance at surviving in this world. I weighed my options. Locals passed through here occasionally, and while I'd heard one story about a ghost, it was usually considered safe. Besides, with my talent being as bad as it was, playing it safe wouldn't get me anywhere. Sometimes you have to risk it to get rich. I began weaving through the dense trees, marking my path as I went. After about 700 steps, a ruined ancient temple appeared. A moss-covered stone tablet stood outside with 3 words carved into it: Qian Temple. I had originally come here just to see if I could find a spirit, but things had clearly escalated. The heat in my forehead was now pulsing intensely, pointing directly toward the center of the temple. I circulated spiritual energy to my eyes and stepped through the gates. The moment I crossed the threshold, I jerked back into a defensive stance, veins popping on my hands. A man was sitting on the steps of the main hall, hugging his knees and staring blankly at the sky. He looked like an honest, simple guy, but his expression was vacant, as if he were contemplating the meaning of life. As I prepared to move, the heat in my forehead vanished instantly. I froze. The man on the steps looked up and saw me. His face lit up with joy for a split second before turning somber again. He went back to staring into space. His reaction was weird, but he didn't seem hostile. "Hey, friend. What's your name?" I called out from 50 paces away. The man's head snapped toward me. His eyes widened. You can see me?" I looked around, confused. "Of course I can. It's broad daylight. Why wouldn't I?" He scrambled to his feet, trembling with excitement. "My name is Zhang Biao. I've been trapped here for 2 months, and I can't get out. Every time I try to leave the woods, I get blocked. No one can see me, but you can. Big brother, what's your name?" "Just a traveler who took a wrong turn," I said, keeping my guard up. "You call me Master Su. If you've been trapped here for 2 months, what have you been eating?" Zhang Biao looked like he was about to cry with happiness just to be talking to someone. He pointed inside the main hall. "There's incense oil in there. I've been eating that whenever I get hungry." That was total nonsense. This temple had been abandoned for decades. Where would he find fresh incense oil? Everything about this place felt wrong. I gripped the hilt of my flying sword. "Master Su, please take me out of here. I can't take it anymore." Zhang Biao started walking toward me. I was about to tell him to stay back when my heart skipped a beat. As he got closer, I noticed something horrifying. From the ankles down, his legs were semi-transparent. He didn't have feet. He was walking on thin air. The most unsettling part was that if I didn't look at him with my eyes, I couldn't sense him at all. Even with a normal human, I could feel their presence and position even with my eyes closed. But Zhang Biao felt like a pocket of empty air. I cut off the flow of spiritual energy to my eyes. Sure enough, the space in front of me was empty. Zhang Biao vanished. He was a spirit. But spirits were supposed to be mindless and aggressive. This guy was acting completely normal. And in my mind, ghosts were supposed to be misty and translucent, but this guy looked solid as a rock. I didn't have time to process it before he reached out to me. Zhang Biao walked toward me with a bright, hopeful smile on his face. I didn't hesitate. I funneled my spiritual energy into my leg and delivered a simple, powerful whip kick straight at him. He didn't even try to defend himself. He looked like a regular person caught completely off guard. With a sharp yelp, Zhang Biao went flying. He crashed straight into the main hall of the Red Cloud Temple, but he didn't make a sound when he hit the floor. I stared into the darkness of the hall, my heart racing. Elder Chow was right. This thing didn't seem dangerous at all, but the impact felt strange. When my leg hit him, it felt like solid flesh, just like kicking a living human. Zhang Biao was definitely no ordinary spirit. I waited for a long time, but he didn't come back out. I steeled my nerves and cautiously approached the temple entrance. I leaned in to peek inside and felt a wave of disbelief wash over me. Zhang Biao was curled up in a ball on the floor, hugging his knees and sobbing his eyes out. I let out a dry cough and forced myself to walk inside. At the sound, he looked up in terror, shrinking back like a cornered animal. "Don't hit me," he whimpered. "Please, don't hit me." He looked so genuinely pathetic that I actually felt a twinge of guilt. I tried to act casual, changing the subject to calm him down. Hey, brother, where is that incense oil you mentioned? You can have it all. You can have it. I don't want it anymore, he stammered, shaking like a leaf. Just please don't hit me. I hesitated, completely confused. Was this really a ghost? I had never imagined a spirit could be this cowardly. How could a creature like this be responsible for killing people? I sighed and lowered my guard. Look, I didn't want to steal your stuff. I thought you were a bandit, so I struck first. It was a misunderstanding. Get up. I'm sorry. Zhang Biao looked up tentatively. Really? Of course. Now, where is this oil? He let out a massive sigh of relief and slowly stood up. He pointed toward the offering table. Right there in that bowl. I looked at the table. There was only one bowl, and it was bone dry. I picked it up. Where is the oil? Zhang Biao saw the empty bowl and panicked. The oil? There was a little bit left in the bottom just a second ago. Where did it go? I could have eaten for days on that. Listening to his illogical rambling, I shook my head. I pointed a finger at him. Brother, you're a ghost. Surely you realize that by now. A ghost? Zhang Biao looked like he'd been struck by lightning. He slumped to the floor, his world crumbling. That's right. 2 months ago, I hanged myself. I shouldn't be alive. I actually forgot until you said it. He looked up at me, his brow furrowed. But if I'm a ghost, why am I still wearing clothes? Can clothes become ghosts too? We both stared at each other in silence. It was a genuine mystery. His logic was so clear that I started to doubt myself. If it wasn't for the fact that he was missing his feet, I would have taken him for a living man. Look at your feet, I said. Where did they go? Zhang Biao looked down. My feet are fine. What's wrong with them? Could he really not see it? I didn't say another word. I withdrew the spiritual energy from my right arm and swung a punch directly at his head. My arm passed straight through the back of his skull. The sensation was bizarre. Zhang Biao went cross-eyed, staring in horror at the arm currently sticking out of his face. He let out a blood-curdling scream. When I finally pulled my hand back, he looked completely lost. I'm a ghost, he muttered over and over. I really am a ghost. But if I'm dead, why am I still hungry? I was hungry when I was alive, and I'm still hungry now. He started wailing, though not a single tear fell from his eyes. It was a heartbreaking sound. It seemed that as a spirit, he could still interact with certain physical objects, which was why he hadn't noticed his condition until now. He looked at me with a tiny spark of hope. Am I really a ghost? Without a doubt, I replied. But what I want to know is, have you killed anyone out there? Kill someone? Zhang Biao looked horrified. Heaven help me. I've never hurt a soul in my entire life. Ever since I hanged myself, I've been stuck right here. I can't go anywhere. I haven't even seen anyone else. Prove it, I said, pointing toward the door. Zhang Biao stood up shakily and walked toward the exit. Watching his back, I felt that nagging doubt again. He looked exactly like a simple, honest peasant. Everything about this place was wrong. As he reached the edge of the temple grounds, he tried to run forward. Suddenly, he slammed into an invisible wall and was sent flying backward. I stood there stunned. Zhang Biao walked back to me, looking defeated. You see? I see, I said, my voice turning grim. There was a barrier here. A powerful restriction that definitely wasn't natural. If something like this had existed for years, the New Blue sect would have known about it. Besides, how could fresh incense oil exist in a temple that had been abandoned for decades? Even the woods outside were unnervingly strange. If it weren't for the green seal guiding me, I might never have found this place. Was he being raised here? Like livestock? How did you die? I asked. Zhang Biao's expression darkened. I worked for a wealthy master. They beat me constantly and never gave me enough to eat. I was always starving. One day, I was so exhausted I knew I couldn't finish my work. I was terrified, so I came to the temple and hanged myself. So he was the servant the tavern owner mentioned. I sighed. I don't get it. Why didn't you kill the people who mistreated you before you ended it? You weren't afraid to die, so why were you afraid to kill them? That would be treasonous, Zhang Biao said without hesitation. My master was the local magistrate. He was a father to the people. Father to the people? Bullshit, I scoffed. Think about it. Where do officials get their money? They take it from the people. You're the one who paid the taxes. You fed him. He took your money to live a life of luxury, and then he treated you like trash. And he expected you to be grateful for the abuse? Does that sound right to you? It's not right. Zhang Biao scrambled forward and covered my mouth. Master Su, don't say such things. You'll get in trouble. I brushed his hand away, not caring at all. Am I wrong? If it were me, I would have fought back. I would have hung him from the rafters. You've already died once. Why are you still acting so weak? Oh, please stop. You'll lose your life. Zhang Biao was hopping with anxiety. He was an honest man, honest to a fault. Fine, I'll stop, I said, waving him off. Tell me about the oil. What else have you seen in this temple? I don't remember much, he murmured. After I died, I just woke up. I was dizzy and starving. Then I found the oil, and it gave me energy. I've been eating it ever since because I can't leave. But as soon as you showed up, the oil vanished. There was enough for days, and now it's gone. I walked back to the offering table and picked up the empty bowl again. It was still empty. Zhang Biao said the oil vanished when I arrived. Ever since I entered these woods, the seal on my forehead had been burning. Could the green seal have consumed whatever was in this bowl? I frowned, examining the bowl more closely. Then I noticed something. The bowl was too clean. Everything else in the temple was buried under decades of dust, but this bowl looked brand new. Even if Zhang Biao had been using it, the outside shouldn't be this spotless. I flipped the bowl over. My heart skipped a beat. Embedded in the bottom was a circular piece of black jade covered in intricate runes. This was a cultivator's tool. Zhang Biao wasn't just a ghost. He was being kept here on purpose. Master Su, Zhang Biao whispered, looking at his hands. I think I really am a ghost. Can you take me with you? Zhang Biao pleaded. Please. I can't die, but I can't live like this either. I don't want to be trapped here forever. He started rambling, his voice high and desperate. I looked at him, my mind racing. I was standing on the edge of something dangerous. Whoever left this bowl and the black jade was a cultivator far beyond my level. If I took Zhang Biao, I might be dragging a massive target onto my back. But then I thought about the oil. It was connected to the green seal on my forehead. The person who set this up hadn't shown their face, and this temple was a ruin with zero spiritual energy. This didn't look like the work of a righteous sect. It looked like a shady, secret operation. If I could get back to the Xinglan sect fast enough, I might be safe. I grit my teeth. Risk was just part of the game now. Shut up already, I said, cutting him off. I'll take you. I'm an immortal. I can get you out of here. Not only that, I'll take you to a celestial mountain where you can eat and drink to your heart's content. Zhang Biao froze. An immortal? Really, Master Su? I nodded solemnly. Really? But listen closely. Not everyone is as nice to ghosts as I am. The world outside is brutal. Everyone else will try to hurt you. Once we get to the mountain, you stay hidden unless I give you permission to come out. Understood. Zhang Biao didn't hesitate. He dropped to his knees and thudded his head against the floor. I'll follow you anywhere, Master Su. Thank you for your mercy. Stand up, I told him. Don't be so pathetic. Let's see what you can do. I need to find a jar or something to carry you in. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, the temple was silent. But not for long. Two figures descended from the sky like falling stars, crashing into the courtyard of the Red Cloud Temple. One wore black robes, the other wore purple. The old man in purple had a sinister, sunken face. He was carrying a severed head, the blood still dripping, except the blood wasn't hitting the floor. It was flowing backward, soaking into his palm until it was completely absorbed. The old man tossed the shriveled head aside and grinned at the younger man in black. Good work, my disciple. How is your side? The pursuers have been led away. The middle-aged man in black replied with a nod. It seems you're in the clear as well, master. The old man laughed and walked into the main hall, his disciple trailing behind. He stopped at the offering table and stared at the empty bowl. His smile vanished. The ancient immortal marrow, it's gone? It was supposed to take 2 months to absorb. The disciple gasped. Then the theory was right. That useless spirit could actually be transformed into a spiritual root. The methods of the ancient immortals are truly terrifying. The old man released his divine sense, a wave of invisible energy sweeping through the temple and the surrounding woods. A cold smile returned to his lips. Good. It seems the process is complete. Even my divine sense can't detect him now. Go find that spiritual root. Once I have it, we'll rule the world. No one, righteous or demonic, will be able to stop us. Congratulations, Master, the disciple said, kneeling. The demonic path will finally have a seat for you at the top. The old man started to laugh, but the sound was cut short. In a flash, the disciple's hand turned into a claw, wreathed in thick, black smoke. He lunged at his master with lightning speed. The old man barely had time to summon a blood-red barrier. It wasn't enough. The strike was devastating. The barrier shattered, and the blow landed square on the old man's chest. An explosion of energy tore through the temple. The roof was blown off, and a pillar of black smoke shot into the sky. The main hall collapsed into a heap of rubble and dust. When the smoke cleared, the temple was a ruin. A deep crater scarred the floor. The two men stood at opposite ends of the wreckage. The disciple had already summoned his weapon, a jagged, ink-black blade wheel that hummed with gathering power. He knew his master was at the peak of the nascent soul realm. Even injured, the old man was a monster. One strike wouldn't be enough to kill him. The old man spat out a mouthful of blood, but he wasn't crying. He was laughing. Good. You've finally learned everything I taught you. Aren't you afraid the pursuers will see that explosion? The pursuers are dead, the disciple said coldly. I don't believe any cultivator in this backwater wasteland can see through the illusions you left behind. The old man spat more blood, staining his teeth red. His grin was ghastly. You ungrateful beast. I took you into that ancient immortal's tomb. I stole the marrow for us. I saved your life a dozen times on the run. If you hadn't leaked your aura like an idiot and scared those mortals, we wouldn't have been chased here in the first place. And now you turn on me. The blade wheel behind the disciple spun faster, glowing with a dark, suffocating light. It was a powerful weapon, but it took time to charge. He needed to keep the old man talking. Save the lecture, Zihi, the disciple spat. I know your secret. You were never going to let me live. You think I don't know the truth about that spiritual root? The ancient immortal who wrote that was insane. He turned himself into marrow just to prove a point. You're too old to break through on your own, but my body is young. You were going to use that root to turn me into your puppet, weren't you? The old man, Zihi, coughed violently, trying to steady his breathing. You think you're special? I didn't pick you because you had talent. I picked you because you were a spineless dog. You son of a bitch, the disciple roared. He was done talking. They had traveled all the way from the southern border, crossing the sea and hiding in righteous territory just to find this chance. He couldn't go back, and he couldn't survive here as a demonic cultivator unless he reached the next level. That spiritual root was his only hope. He didn't know if his master was faking his weakness or if he was truly dying. It didn't matter. The blade wheel was fully charged. Master, the disciple said, his voice dropping to a low hiss. Since you taught me everything I know, I'll give you one chance. Leave now, and I'll let you live. You just insulted my mother, and now you're acting like a saint. Zihi sneered. You really are just like me. You think you can kill me? Then come. Try it. The disciple stepped forward, his eyes locked on his master. I just want to show you some filial piety before you go. The blade will scream through the air like a black meteor. It grew from the size of a plate to several meters wide in an instant, tearing toward the old man's face. The black light it emitted withered every plant it touched, turning wood to ash. At this distance, there was no way to dodge. But Zihi didn't even try. He just stood there, hunched over, watching the blade come. A cold shiver ran down the disciple's spine. Something was wrong, but it was too late to stop. The killing blow was already dealt. The blade wheel was inches from Zihi's chest when the world turned upside down. There was a sudden, sharp crack. That indestructible weapon and its dense black light just shattered. It didn't hit him. It exploded. The fragments and the surging dark energy didn't move forward. They roared backward like a flood filled with jagged glass. My disciple didn't even have time to scream. The backwash swallowed him whole. A massive cloud of dust kicked up, obscuring everything. When the air finally cleared, only Zihi was left standing in the center of the clearing. He smiled. He straightened his hunched back and walked toward the wreckage. The man in the black robe was barely clinging to life. He lay there, breathing only by instinct. His skin had withered and turned a sickly gray. Countless wounds pierced his body from head to toe. His entire right arm had been sliced clean off, yet not a single drop of blood leaked out. Z stopped right in front of him. He looked down with a flicker of genuine pity in his eyes. He told the boy the truth. He really was at his limit after being hunted by that monk. Any simple spell probably would have finished him off. But the disciple had been too careful. He had used a forbidden killing move instead. You always think people are too complicated, Zihi whispered. And that's how you got played. The dying man looked up with eyes full of sorrow. He couldn't fight back anymore. He couldn't understand why his own treasure had turned on him. It defied all logic. Zihi looked completely relaxed now. He knew his student had been planning to use that weapon on him for the entire journey. They had been exploring an ancient immortal's tomb, and the disciple thought he had found a prize behind his master's back. He thought he was lucky. There are no shortcuts in this world, Zihi muttered. Don't go looking for them in your next life. The disciple realized the truth in his final moments. The weapon had been a plant. It was a trap left there specifically for him to find. Rage flared up in his chest one last time. He gathered his final breath to curse the old man. He called him an old dog. He told him he would die a horrible death. He didn't get the last word out. Z stepped down. He crushed the disciple's head like a ripe watermelon. Immediately, a dark, bird-like soul manifested from the corpse and bolted toward the sky. It was a desperate attempt to escape. Z didn't even bother looking up. He just flicked his wrist. A streak of bloody light shot out and intercepted the soul in midair. It vanished without a sound. Stupid dog, Zihi spat. A wild, manic grin spread across his face. Every threat was gone. Every loose end was tied. Now, all he had to do was find a spiritual root nearby. He would rebuild his foundation and steal a new destiny from the heavens themselves.